All right, Joe, we'll say good morning. Let us begin. Let us begin. Begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's share, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan, to thank Baruch Meir and Rina Dubin for dedicating all the Shirman Drashos this month in the Schus of Refuah Shalema for their niece Chabat Zipora Bas Chaim Malka, to thank Shmuley and Liba Dinovitz for dedicating the Shiurim this month in the Schus for the Aliyah for the Neshama of Shmuley's father, Harav Peretz Avram, then Harav Binyamin Moshe. To thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Adam and Leslie Rosen, for a Refuah in the Schus of Refuah for Esther Bas Sarah, and our Day of Learning sponsor, Lloyd Chazen. This is Mr. Maravich is also here, Baruch Hashem. Today's the Torontonians. Hey, Lloyd Chazen, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of his father, Moshe Michal ben Shimon Yaakov, Zichron Libracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families a nechama, and all of those who require a refuah shalema should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Well, so with that, let us begin. A beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. A really interesting daf. Today's daf is Kuf Beis 102, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Kuf Aleph Amud Beis 101b, and we're picking up at the 2 dots, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines up from the bottom. Amar Rava. Rava says as follows. So let's remember again, yesterday we had the great zichos to begin this new parak, 12th parak of Yevamos Mitzvahs Chalitza, and it is here that we're really getting into the details, mamish the details, regarding the mitzvah of Chalitza. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Tzrichi dayanim lemikvah duchta. When performing Chalitza, the dayanim, now as we already established in yesterday's daf, that you don't really need dayanim, right? Ultimately, all you need is 3 people, even hedyotos, even regular individuals. They just have to be capable of feeding the lines to the respective individuals, to the yavam and to the yevama. Now, another interesting halacha, which is when performing chalitza, they have to establish a place. In other words, you can't do like pick-up chalitza. You can't decide to do chalitza. They have to establish a spot in which chalitza is going to occur. And the mikdash means lemikva duchta. Rashi says l'shem kach. In other words, that there has to be a statement, we're going to perform chalitza in so-and-so location. So the Gemara says, where do we get that from? The chsiv, v'alsa yevimto hashara el hazekenim. Because we'll say, interestingly enough, the pasuk says that the yevama, the woman, will come to the gates. Now, the gates of the city represent where Beis Din would normally establish itself. But the fact that the pasuk says that she comes up to the shara, she comes up to the gate, indicates to us that Yibum requires a specific predefined location. So the Gemara tells some stories about this. Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua of the Uvda Bechamisha. Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua once participated in a chalitza, and they assembled a group of 5. A group of 5 came in Rabbi Huda. So we'll say, who does 5 represent? That's Rabbi Huda. We saw this in yesterday's daf. What does Rabbi Huda darshan? Rabbi Huda says, the pasuk says, Ziknei, which is 2, Zikenim, which is 2, and you can't have a Beis Din shakel. You can't have an even-numbered Beis Din. So you add on 1, that's 5. But 1 second, what did we see in yesterday's daf? V'ha'hadr bey. But yet Rabbi Yehuda himself retracted or recanted, right? He went ahead and he backed down from that position, and he actually came around to the position that says you only need 3, not 5. So what's going on over here? Tushimar says, you're right. They really only need 3. So why did they get 5? Lepersume milsa, in order to go ahead and publicize the matter. So we'll say it's actually very interesting. So in other words, that sometimes halacha l'maaseh, you could go ahead and establish a Beis Din, and then you might add on numbers to that Beis Din, not because you need additional numbers, but why? Because you want to be mefarsim. You want the matter to have some level of publicity. Obviously, the more people you have on your Beis Din, the more publicity the matter gets. Good. Ravashi ikla lebei Rav Kahana. Ravashi went to ask Rav Kahana. Amrlei salik mar legabon limaluye bechamisha. So we'll say Ravashi went to the house of Rav Kahana, and Rav Kahana said, good, we're so happy you're here. You're going to help us fill out a group of 5 to perform a chalitza. Amr Rav Kahana, havakaimna kamid Rav Yehuda, va'amrli ta sak lezirza dikani litzaruf bechamisha. Another story. Rav Kahana said, I was once in front of Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda said to me, come, go up to the place where there is the bundle of reeds in order to go ahead and help us create a group of 5. Now, there's 2 things happening over here. Number one, he's telling him to go to the place where there's the bundle of reeds. This goes back to what we said before in the name of Rava, namely that the Dayanim have to pre-establish a spot in which the Chalitza is going to occur, right? So that's why he's telling him, go up to the place where there's the bundle of reeds. That pre-establishes the spot. Now, of course, interestingly enough, he's also telling him, and you'll become part of our group of 5. Group of 5, why do you need 5 for a Chalitza? Amru lo lama li chamisha. Why do I need 5? So he said to him, milsa. Ultimately, in order that the matter should have some level of publicity. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, we seem to see this theme over here, that halacha l'maisa, even though Rabbi Yehuda himself went ahead and said you no longer need 5, but in order to create some level of publicity with this, we go ahead and we have 5. Not because the Beis Din needs 5, but to create publicity around the Chalitza event. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Havakai kamed Rav Yehuda. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda was in front of Rav Yehuda. Amar le sak ta lizir zadekani litzarif bechamisha. Same thing. Go up to the place where there's the bundle of reeds, and go ahead and come and become part of our group of 5. Why? So once again, 2 things happening over here. Number one, go to a particular location. So that's based on what we learned before in the name of Rava, that Chalitza has to take place in a predefined location. And number 2, he's adding in, become part of this group of 5. Why part of the group of 5? Lifar sume milsa. Not because the Beis Din for Chalitza requires 5, but because 5 ultimately will create greater publicity. Beautiful. Amarle Tanina be Yisrael Beis Din. I'm sorry, Amarle Tanina be Yisrael Beis Din Yisrael below Beis Din Shal Gerim. And I both say, so now there's a wrinkle in this story. So remember again, let's go back for just a moment. This is Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, who's coming before Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda tells Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, go up to the place where there's the bundle of reeds and become, so predefined location, and become part of our group of 5. Fine. So now we've pre-established location. And number 2, we also go ahead and halacha l'maisa have a group of 5. Not that you need a group of 5, but rather again, the group of 5 is there for what purpose? To create a pearsum, to create publicity. Then Abu Say comes along Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda and says, Rabbi, I don't think I could do this. Amalei Tanina be Yisrael. The Torah says that Chalitza has to happen be Yisrael. What do I learn from that? The Beis Din Yisrael, v'lo Beis Din Shal Gerim. It should happen in a Beis Din of Jews and not a Beis Din of Gerim. Rabbi say, Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, look at Rashi for just a moment. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, actually we'll get to it in just a moment. He said, let's read it. So the Gemara says, Va'ana ger ana. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda says, I'm a convert. That was, if you look at Rashi, Va'ana ger ana hu va'aviv nisgairu. That was, this is very interesting. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, he and his father converted. So interestingly enough, what must have happened over here is as follows. They converted as adults, but he's known as Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. So I will say, if you remember again, we actually touched on this earlier in the Masechta about the concept of a family converting together. And ultimately, again, the concept that when a family converts together, it is possible for the familial unit in some respects to remain intact. So Rav Shmuel and his father, Yehuda, obviously that's his Jewish name, right? That's his Hebrew name. Once he converted, they converted together. And apparently he remained known as Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. So he says something fascinating. He says, I can't serve on this Beis Din for Chalitza because the Beis Din for Chalitza by definition requires Jews who are Jewish from birth, not Gerim. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Shavidi said, by the way, this Kigon Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Mafikna Mamona Apume. This guy, Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, he is so honest and so upstanding, I would even extract money based on his testimony. So the Gemara says, Mafikna, you would extract money based on his testimony. You can't extract money based on anyone's singular testimony, right? Extracting money has to be a din of what? Of a din Torah. To which the Gemara says, V'ha'a pishnaim eida amar rachmana. You can only extract money based on the testimony of 2 witnesses. Ella marano shtara apume. Rather, again, Rav Yehuda said, I would go ahead and downgrade the validity of a shtar based on his testimony. Look at Rashi, what does this mean? Merana shtar apume, di omer yedana be, di paria lo mizdakina le babe. Shabbos say there's a concept like this, that let's say someone comes to Beis Din, right? Reuven presents a shtar against Shimon, right? And then a witness shows up and says, it's true that Reuven has the shtar, but I know that Shimon paid it off already. I know that he paid it off already. Shabbos says, Rav Yehuda said, if Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda were to come to Beis Din, and he were to say, I know that there's a shtar, but the shtar is paid off, I would believe him. So in other words, both say, the point over here is, without getting into the halachic legal details, what's happening over here? Rav Yehuda is saying, Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda is such an upstanding individual that his word would carry so much weight in Beis Din. But I will say, let's go back and talk about this. We've now, here's what we have. Number one, how many people do you need for the Beis Din for Chalitza? How many people? 3, right? Why do we see them sometime using 5? Pirsum to create publicity. Next halacha, you must go ahead and pre-establish a place, a location in which the chalitza process is going to occur. Shara, learn that from Shara. Now, new halacha, Gerim cannot serve on the Beis Din for chalitza, apparently. So let's analyze this piece. So Amar Rava says, top of Kuf Beis, top line 102a, Ger danes chaveru dvar Torah. Let's listen to this. A ger is permitted to go ahead and judge his friend. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Ger danes chavero, dine nefashos. Dile dine mamnas afilu kol Yisrael. This is not a kol kshem ladun dine mamnas. So we'll say, so we're going to see over here, a ger is permitted to go ahead and judge a capital case for another ger. It goes without saying, says Rashi, that a ger could judge monetary cases. Anyone could judge monetary cases, but a ger is permitted to sit on a capital case for another ger. Shene emar, som tasim alecha melech, asher yivchar Hashem elokecha ba mikerev achecha tasim alecha. Shabbos say, listen to this. The Torah over here quotes the pasuk. Now this is by a king, right? By a king, the Torah says, place a king upon you. Som tasim alecha melech, place a king upon you. Asher yivchar Hashem elokecha ba, Hashem will choose mikerev achecha, from the midst of your brethren. Tasim alecha melech. Shall you go ahead and place a king upon you? So Rabbi say, this concept, by the way, teaches me that for positions of higher leadership, you must appoint Jews who are Jews from birth and can't appoint gerim, cannot appoint converts. This is learned out from the concept of mikerev achecha. The Rabbi say, the Gemara makes a fascinating drasha. The Gemara says, alecha hu deba'ina mikerev achecha. It is only that a ger cannot go ahead. So we'll say, so for example, we know this is why a ger cannot be appointed king. Cannot be appointed king, right? You can't have, which of course makes also a ger has to come from Shevet Yehuda. I also remember again, the detractors of David HaMelech, one of the ways that they wanted to delegitimize his claim to the throne was because of Rus. Because she was a Giores. They felt that he was totally disqualified. Of course, again, they ignored a lot of other familial information in between Rus and David. But the point over here is that a ger cannot become king. Similarly, again, a ger cannot be a member of the Sanhedrin. That ultimately, again, when there is going to be someone, because again, Rashi points out over here that a dayan, a judge, has the same status as a king. Rashi, if you look at Rashi, so we'll say Rashi says, Dayan bichlal melech, tesiv melech b'mishpat ya'amid aretz. So the dayan, the judge, has the same status as the king. So Rabbi will say, whenever there is someone alecha upon you, your person upon you, either the king or the judge, must have the same genealogical status as you, i.e., Jewish from birth. Now, what that tells you is, however, a ger can serve on a Beis Din over other gerim. So a ger could adjudicate a capital case for other gerim. But for a Jew from birth, anyone who's going to sit in a leadership position on top of a Jew from birth ultimately has to be mikerev achecha, a Jew from birth as well. So the Gemara says, Alecha hu daba'ina mikerev achecha, aval ger dan es chavero ger. But one ger is permitted to go ahead and sit in judgment on another ger. Now, I will say a very important qualification. Vim haise imam Yisrael dan afilu Yisrael. Now, this is actually very important. When we speak about a ger, so remember again, this is either talking about someone who ultimately, again, himself converted, or has born to two parents who converted, or someone himself who converted. But if his mother was Jewish, so let's say if you have a situation of a person whose mother is Jewish, but let's say whose father is not Jewish, that person doesn't have the status of a ger. That person has the status of a Yisrael, a regular Jew. In other words, if you're born to a Jewish mother, you're in. Nothing really more to go ahead and discuss. Good. So we'll say now, for our purposes, ule'inyan chalitza. I will say the exception to this is chalitza, and this is fascinating. Ule'inyan chalitza, ache aviv v'imo miYisrael. I will say this is fascinating. Apparently, the judicial requirements for chalitza are stronger than even the judicial requirements for a capital case. See, for a capital case, we've just established is you can sit on a basin for a capital. Again, for a capital case, if it's a capital case, if the defendant is a ger, then even a ger is permitted to be a judge. If the defendant is a Yisrael, then the judge must be Jewish from birth. Definition of Jewish from birth, born to a Jewish mother. For chalitza, this is incredible. For chalitza, achi ave v'ima miYisrael. You need to be born to both a Jewish mother and father. Where does that come from? Shene'emar v'nikra shemo b'Yisrael. Then I will say, now what I want to point out is, what is this talking about in the pasuk? This is talking about over here, if you do chalitza. If a man does chalitza with his sister-in-law, v'nikra shmo b'Yisrael, beis chalutz hanal. The man will be known b'Yisrael. Now, I will say, the Gemara darshans, what does it mean he'll be known b'Yisrael? Look at Rashi. Mashma shehei Misrael Yisrael mikol tzadin. This is an incredible drasha. So I will say, the pasuk says he will be known b'Yisrael. The Gemara is understanding that b'Yisrael means the Beis Din that is administering the chalitza. The Beis Din that is administering the chalitza has to be b'Yisrael. What does it mean to be b'Yisrael? B'Yisrael means you are Yisrael from all sides. From all sides. From your mother's side, from your father's side, you are Yisrael on every single side. So incredible. So it turns out, isn't this incredible? So it turns out that the requirements for a Beis Din for chalitza are actually more intense than the requirements for a Beis Din for a capital case. Now the truth is, it's not a chiddush. It's just it's a pasuk. It's a pasuk that for chalitza, ultimately again the Beis Din has to be Yisrael. The Dayanim have to be Jewish on both, they're from their mother and from their father. Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Kana, Amar Rav. So I'll say incredible Gemara. Im Yavo Eliyav. So I'll say, so now we're going to transition. We're going to learn anything and everything you ever wanted to know about shoes. Right? So this is, if you're a shoe person, this is your Gemara. So listen to this. Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Kana, Amar Rav. Im Yavo Eliyav, V'yomar choltzim b'minal, shomin lo. Ein choltzim b'sandal, ein shomin lo. So let's listen to this. Rav Kana said the name of Rav. If Eliyahu Hanavi were to come, and he were to tell us today, you could do chalitza with a minal. And I will say, we'll discuss exactly what we're going to do, I will say, is as we go through this sugya, we're going to learn about the details for the shoe for chalitza. There are going to be a number of different details. At the end of the sugya, we'll put the details together and we'll be able to actually see, right? We'll see pictures, ultimately, of what the chalitza shoe itself actually looks like. Now I will say, just so we get our terms correct, we already saw Rashi. Rashi in the Mishnah said, what's a minal? Minal, getting translated as shoe. But Rashi in the Mishnah said, shel orach, this is a shoe of soft leather, ke'ein shalanu, a shoe like ours. Then I will say, when Rashi says a shoe like ours, what does that mean? It means it covers all sides of the foot. That's a minal, for our purposes. Minal means soft leather, covers all sides of the foot. So therefore, again, Rav Kana says the name of Rav Eliyahu, if he were to come and to tell us he can't do chalit, you could do. I'm sorry. If Eliyahu were to come and he were to say you could do chalitza with a minal, and we're going to see a minal is not ideal. But if you could do chalitza with a minal, we would listen to him. Fine. However, if he were to say ein choltzin besandal, that you can't do chalitza with a sandal, in shomelo, we wouldn't listen to him. Why not? Shekvar na'agu ha'am b'sandal, because Klal Yisrael has already been using a sandal. Now I will say, is a very profound Gemara, also about the power of Minhag Yisrael. That when Klal Yisrael does something, and Klal Yisrael has been doing something, for a very long time, ultimately, again, that takes on the power of halacha. And I will say, you always have to go ahead and be careful with this, right? It doesn't mean, you know what, I know in my family we've been mechalale Shabbos for generations, right? So again, this is our minog, this is what we do, this is our mesorah. No, obviously, again, right? So we'll say, so no, but in all seriousness, sometimes people get used to certain types of behaviors, and, that's not obviously what we're referring to over here. We're talking about the idea that something has become ingrained within Klal Yisrael for generations. So again, Klal Yisrael has been using the sandal for generations. So ultimately, even if Eliyahu were to come and to say, we cannot go ahead and use the sandal, we would not listen to him. So Rav Yosef Amar Rav Kana Amar Rav, Im Yavo Eliyahu Yomar Ein Cholzen B'Minal Shomilo. If Eliyahu were to come and he were to say, we don't do chalitza with a minal, Shomilo, we listen to him. So we'll say a little bit of an alternate version. If Eliyahu were to come and were to say, we won't use the minal for chalitza, we would listen to him. However, in cholzin b'sandal, if he were to say we don't do chalitza with a sandal, then in shomelo, then we would not listen to him. Why? Shekvar no gua am b'sandal. Ultimately, again, because Klal Yisrael has already conducted itself to use a sandal. So my beinayu. Ultimately, again, what's the difference between them? Ika beinayu minal lechatchila. Shabbos, what's the difference? In other words, what's the difference in these two versions? Right? The difference in the two versions, Rabbosai, is whether or not a minal can be used lechatchila. You see, everyone agrees the sandal is used. The sandal is used, and the sandal is even used lechatchila, and that's the point. The sandal is so part of the chalitza process that even if Eliyahu were to come and were to say, you can't use the sandal, we wouldn't listen. The shaila is minal. Minal, we use it, and again, in version number 1, if Eliyahu were to say use it, we would accept it. In version number 2, if Eliyahu were to say stop using it, we would stop using it. So what's the nafkamina between version 1 and version 2? Can a minal be used lechatchila for chalitza? That's the fundamental shaila, and we'll delve into that. Ulam andam rafil lechatchila, and according to the opinion that says the minal can be used even lechatchila, v'hatnan we learned chaltza b'minal chalitza sekshera diavad in lechatchila. But if you look at the Mishnah, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says that halacha l'maisa, if you went ahead and you did chalitza with the minal, your chalitza is kosher. And I will say, what does that lashon seem to indicate? That lashon indicates b'diavad, right? That if you went ahead and you used a minal b'diavad, that ultimately it works, but lechatchila not. To which the Gemara says, no, you can't infer from the Mishnah. Hu adin dafi lechatchila. In reality, you could even use the minal lechatchila. Va'aydi debayla misnei seifa ba'an pila chalitza sapsula. But since at the end of the day, the seifa of the Mishnah says that if you used it on pila, but remember again, how do we translate on pila? Socks. That's for now. We'll redefine that a little bit today as well. Since that the seifa said that if you use the ampila, the chalitza is possible. Therefore, dafilu b'di'eved, even b'di'eved, you can't use the socks. Tani nami reisha di'eved. We use the same type of lashon of b'di'eved, ultimately again, by the case of minal as well. So it's really just mishnaic symmetry, but you can't really infer whether or not minal can be used even lechatchila. To which the Gemara says, "Minal lechatchila tanahi." In reality, the use of a minal lechatchila is a machlokes Hashem. So I'll say, just want to point out what we have over here so far is like this: sandal for chalitza. What's the halacha? Sandal for chalitza, lechatchila. To the point that even if Eliyahu Navi b'chvodo ba'atzmo shows up and says no more sandal, what do we say to Eliyahu Navi? Take a hike, right? I will say, scary part is, could it be that we've already told Eliyahu Navi to take a hike, right? Isn't the scariest thing about Gula is that when Gula presents itself, ultimately again, we will be ready to accept it. We'll be ready to embrace it, or we will be so set in our ways that even if Eliyahu Navi is talking to us, we will not listen. But sandal, yes, lechatchila, right? Let's go on the other side of the spectrum. And pila, socks, everyone agrees, even b'di'eved, no. The interesting point of contention over here is minal. Now the Gemara says minal is a machlokes tanoim. Listen to this. It was a great story. So the Gemara says, Disanya, Rabbi Yossi said, Pam achos halachti l'netzivin. One time I went to the city of Netzivin, and I will say, Matzasi zakin echad, and I found an old man. Amarti lo, klum atabaki Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira lived in the town of Nitzivin. So Rabbi Yossi shows up in the town. He finds an old man. He says, "Tell me, what do you know about? Do you know any of the halachas of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira?" Amar lo hein. The old man said, "Yes." Va'al shulchani hu tadir. And in fact, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira used to frequent my table often. Incredible. Klum ra'isa shechalatz b'Yevamos. Rabbi Yossi says to the old man, "Tell me, did you ever see Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira do a chalitza? Right? Did you ever see him do a chalitza?" Amar li ra'isi shechalatz harbe pamim. Sure, I saw chalitzas all the time. I saw a lot of chalitzas. So Rabbi Yossi says, "Tell me, when Rabbi Yehuda did a chalitza b'minal o b'sandal, what shoe did he use? Did he use a minal? Did he use a sandal?" Amar, the old man said to me, "V'chi cholzen b'minal." Incredible. So the old man said, "What kind of question is that? Are you allowed to do chalitza with a minal? Are you allowed to do chalitza with a shoe?" HaTorah amar narav lo minal. Amar lo imkain mara. So again, so the old man says back to Rabbi Yossi, "You can't do chalitza with a minal." Of course, when Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira did a chalitza, what did he do? What did he do a chalitza with? With a sandal. Amarti lo imkain mara Rabbi Meir lomar chalza b'minal chalitza sekshera. So Rabbi Yossi says back to the old man, "But what about the Mishnah that says that if you did chalitza with a minal, your chalitza is kosher?" Now both say, he says, "Mara Rabbi Meir." Now remember again, our Mishnah is a stam Mishnah, a Mishnah without attribution. We generally assume that who is the author of Mishnah without attribution? Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir said in a stam Mishnah that if you did chalitza with a minal, the chalitza is kosher. So Rabbi Yaakov Amar Mishmo Cholzin b'minal v'chatchila. And furthermore, again, Rabbi Yaakov even said in his name that as we just said before, from the Mishnah, it sounds like Rabbi Meir is saying you could do chalitza with a minal, but it's only kosher b'diavad. But in fact, Rabbi Yaakov says in the name of Rabbi Meir that it's even l'chatchila. So like we just said before, so why did Rabbi Meir phrase it as only good b'diavad? Why? Mishnaic symmetry, textual symmetry. So Rabbi, what do you see from here? You see it's machlokes tanaim. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira would not do a chalitza with a minal. Rabbi Meir, you could do chalitza with a minal. From the Mishnah, it sounds like b'diavad, but Rabbi Yaakov says even l'chatchila. So what's going on over here? So the Gemara says, "Umandam l'chatchila lo my taima." So we have a fundamental machlokes. Can you use a minal or not? So let's talk about this a little bit. The opinion who says that l'chatchila you can't use a minal. What's wrong with the minal? To which the Gemara says, "My taima ilema mishum dahavya pansa me'al va'araksa me'al de me'al." Rabbi say, here's the problem with a minal, right? The pansa, what's the pansa? So Rabbi say, a minal is what we'll call a typical shoe. So what do you have on a typical shoe, right? You have the sole, the sides, and the top. So maybe the problem with a minal is, we'll say, fascinating. You have the pansa. The pansa is the upper section. The upper section of the shoe. That's called me'al. So Rabbi say, just to point out over what's happening is, the Torah is going to say that the lashon is v'cholza na'alo me'al raglo. She has to remove his shoe from me'al, from upon his foot, which we're going to see means that the removal of the shoe must be a removal of something that is directly upon the foot of the yavam. So watch this. Maybe the problem with the minal is like this. You have the pansa, which is the upper section of the shoe, araksa, and then you have the straps, the laces. And where do the laces sit? On top of the top part of the shoe. So maybe the problem is she's going to have to obviously undo the laces and then take off the shoe. Maybe the fact that she has to undo the laces, and the laces don't sit right on top of the foot. What do the laces sit on top of? On top of the upper section. Maybe that's called me'al de me'al. Maybe that's called something on top of something. Torah amra me'al. So we'll say incredible. The Torah says the Yevamos has to remove the shoe from on top of the foot. The problem is if you're using a minal, she removes the laces, and the laces are not on top of the foot. What are the laces on top of? The laces are on top of something that is on top of the foot. Incredible. if that's the case, okay, I hear that. I'll say, by the way, just see, isn't it absolutely incredible? What a musar, we think to ourselves, really, just take off the shoe. Just take off the shoe. Let's move on with our lives. Right? I'll say, sometimes, the phrase goes, the devil is in the details. It's not the devil in the details. It's the Ribono Shel Olam in the details. Life is all about the details. People like to say, I'm like a big picture person. I have yet to meet a fully successful big picture person, right? Any big picture person who's not mired in details, or at least doesn't have a staff of people who are mired in details, right? Can't be successful. Life is all about the details. So Shabbos say, this is it. It's a detail. The Torah says, me'al. So what does me'al mean? Me'al means from on the foot. So maybe the problem is if you're using a minal, you're removing laces which are not on top of the foot. They're on top of something that's on top of the foot. If that's the case, I hear it, but it makes perfect sense. But if that's the case, I feel di eved namilo. If that's the case, I will say then even bidi eved, a minal shouldn't work. To which the Gezerah says, I feel di eved namilo. To which the Gemara says, you're right. That's not the problem. What's the problem with a minal? Gezerah mishum minal merufat. So I will say the problem over here now is because ultimately, again, of a minal merufat. Rashi says merufat, it's almost right across. Mevuka karua milamala. Dechevan derachich afagav dekarua miyasiv le akare. As I say, the issue over here is because of a torn minal. Iachi mishum chatzi minal. The possibility is because if a person is wearing a half a minal, which I will say is ultimately, again, only covers half of the foot. Amarav, ilav dechamise lechavive, dechalatz besandal deisle shinsin, analo havi chalitzna ela besandala detaya demahadik tvei. So Rav says, had I not seen my uncle go ahead and perform a chalitza with a sandal that has straps, so we'll say, now this is back to a sandal for just a moment, I would have only used the sandal that the Arab merchants wear. What type of sandal do the Arab merchants wear? Demahadik tvei. It's a very snug fit. In other words, it doesn't rely on laces to really go ahead and lace it up. It's a very snug fit. V'hai didan, and I will say, what about our sandals? So I will say, so I just want to point out over here, so what we have over here is the potential problems with using a minal. Either maybe it's a me'al de me'al, the problems with the laces that sit on top of the upper part of the leather. Other possibility is a concern that you may come to use a torn minal. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. Another possibility is you may come to use an ill-fitting minal. Now, both say we're transitioning back to a sandal. So you have Rav who comes along and says, even with a sandal, I would have preferably not used the sandal that relied on straps. I would have used the sandal that ultimately is tight-fitting. V'hai didan, our sandal, afagav de ispe chamarta, even though again our sandals have a knot, katrinan be misna kihechi de tehavi chalitza ma'al yasa. We still both say, so now this is a fascinating detail. It's very interesting. If you look at Rashi says over here, afagav de ispe chamarta, kesher kasher al svasavu ma'amido shelo yetze min haregel afilochi b'shas chalitza katrinan be misna kihechi de tesihi v'tishrei avodat hachos. We'll say we're going to see something fascinating. So let me translate the words and then we'll explain what this is. So the Gemara says as follows. So Rav says that ultimately, again, our sandals, even though they have a knot, then I will say the sandal that he's referring to over here must have had one knot at the opening to keep the sandal was a snugger fit, right? The leather was a snugger fit, and there was one knot to keep the sandal on the leg, on the foot. What we're going to see is for chalitza, we are makbid to use a sandal that has a strap. And a strap that actually fastens the sandal to the leg itself. And also we're going to see why we need to use that. All of that is based on the fact that the Torah, when describing the chalitza process, says that the chalitza goes ahead and v'chalza na'al me'al raglo. She's taking off. So again, we're going to dash it, but we're going to see that we're building up our shoe construct. So far what we're seeing is the ideal is to use what? Sandal. Now we're going to see, well, it's not just any sandal, but it's also a sandal with straps. where those straps have to go, we're going to develop in Miras Hashem. Let's go back there. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Hataras Yevama L'Shuk B'Shmitas Rov HaEkev. So what's interesting? When does the actual event of chalitza occur? I will say, at what point in time of shoe removal is she considered to be a chalutza? So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, the moment that the majority of the heel is revealed, so the moment that the majority of the shoe is removed from the heel, at that moment, she is a chalutza. Meisvei, is that true? Husru ritzuos minal v'sandal. Right. Ultimately, once you remove the straps of the minal of the shore of the sandal, osha shamat rov haregel, or the majority of the foot is removed, chalitza sapsula. Ultimately, and the chalitza is puzzle. Taima deshamatu. Now, the reason I will say why the chalitza is puzzle, why? Because he removed the majority of his foot. Hasham tehi, but if she removed it, chalitza sekshera. The chalitza would be kosher. Then I will say, what's important for us over here? Rov haregel in. When is chalitza kosher according to the brayso? When the majority of the foot, right? Rov ha'ekev lo, the majority of the heel, not so. To which the Gemara said, conscious we just said before, lo, the Gemara says, hainu rov haregel, hainu rov ha'ekev. It's the same thing. Majority of the foot, it means the majority of the heel. Ba'amai karle rov haregel. Why do you call the majority of the heel the majority of the foot? Because ultimately, again, the majority of the weight of the foot, of the body, rests itself on the heel. So I will say, very important halacha l'maisa. At what point in time is chalitza complete? When the majority of the heel has been removed from the shoe. Good. So the Gemara goes weiter. What's a very interesting case. Whether he untied the shoes and she removed it, or she untied the shoes and he removed his foot, chalitza sapsula. The chalitza is puzzle. Ad sheyatir he v'tashmeti. I will say the only time that chalitza is kosher is when she has to untie, she has to remove the shoe. The woman must drive. The Yevama must drive the chalitza process. She has to untie and she has to remove. So by Rabbi Yanai, listen to this. Rabbi say, Karasu ma'u, sarafsu ma'u. So what's the interesting case? What happens if she tore the shoe off? She tore the shoe off. Or she burned the shoe off. That's an interesting one. Right? She burnt the shoe off, right? In other words, mission accomplished. The shoe is off his foot. He might not have a foot either, right? The shoe is off the foot. But Lamaisa, she did it in a different kind of way. So she tore the shoe off, she burnt the shoe off, right? What's the halacha? Mao, gilui karaba'ina v'ha'iga. So do we need the foot revealed, right? We need the foot uncovered, the foot revealed, and the mission accomplished, right? Odilma, chalitza ba'ina v'laka. Or maybe not. I will say maybe the process of chalitza is dafka, not just the revealing of the heel, but also what? The actual removal of a shoe. So I'll say, which one is it? Which the Gemara says, teku. We're not sure. We'll say it's a fundamental shaila, right? Is the chalitza the bearing of the heel, or is the chalitza the removal of the shoe? Or I will say there's a third possibility, which is what? It's both. So the Gemara says teiko. We're not sure. Okay. So the Gemara goes weiter. Good. Interesting case. What happens if the yavam is wearing two shoes? One shoe on top of the other. So I will say, what's the halacha? Well, what's the halacha in this kind of case? What's the case? So I'll say, if you tell me she's removing the outer shoe and leaving behind the inner shoe, so there's no shaila. That's obviously not good. Remember again, is what we established before. She has to remove the shoe that is on his foot. So halacha, if she's only removing the outer shoe but leaving the inner shoe, that's obviously not a good chalitza because that's me'al de me'al. She's removing something that's on top of something that's on the foot. Lo tzricha dikarasi le'ele v'shalaf l'tasai. Now, so here's the case. The case is where she tore open the outer one and removed the inner one. So I will say, if you could imagine for a moment, if he's wearing two thin pairs of shoes, she tears open the outer one, but the outer one is still what? Still on him. But if you can imagine, she tears open, let's say, the bottom of the outer one and then removes the inner one. What's the halacha? V'kai iloi. My chalitza b'inavaika. So we'll say, do we say, listen, we require the removal of the inner shoe, and she's done that. O dilma Giluye kara ba'inon veleka. Or do we say we need a total revealing of the foot? And Abba say that's not the case over here. Because also remember again, so imagine she tears open the outer shoe, goes in, removes the inner shoe. So now Abba says, has the inner shoe been removed? Has the inner shoe been removed? Yes. Has the foot been revealed? No. Why? Because the outer shoe still remains there. So what's the halacha? Amud Beis. So the Gemara says, Umi ika kia gavna. I will say it's always interesting to see when the Gemara plays this card, right? Well, come on, can a case like this really happen? Like, really, this is the case you're asking this, right? Right? This is what bothers you. Multiple shoes is what keeps you up at night. So I said, but yet the Gemara says, just from a Tzitz perspective, do people wear multiple shoes? People wear multiple shoes. To which the Gemara says, in the Chazyu the Rabban al Yehuda. The nafik bechamisha, the Hagosian changes this to chamisha zugos. Rabbi Yehuda once went out with 5 pairs of shoes. We'll say the Maharsha comments on this, right? Chamisha zugos muki l'shuka. The Maharsha points out that why did Rabbi Yehuda do this? Because again, he was ill, or he was like an istinus, very cold. So the 5 pairs of shoes gave his feet warmth. Okay, the point over here is people did it. People did it. They went with. But it almost seems like they must have had more like a sock shoe type of thing. But Lamaisa, okay, 5 pairs of shoes. I'm going to do Rav. So both say. So again, I just want to point out. The Gemara doesn't go ahead and seem to answer this one, right? The Gemara goes ahead and just kind of leaves this one without resolution. We'll see what the halacha Lamaisa is. Anyway, the Gemara goes weiter. So Rav Yehuda Rav. Yevamos shegdila ben achin. We'll say it's a fascinating case. Let's say you have a Yevama, shehegdila min ha'achin. In other words, I will say, so she lived amongst the brothers. So I will say, so the case over here, here's the case. The family lives together. So Rachel's married to Reuven, one of the brothers, and Reuven passes away. So now what happens? They're all living in the house together. So Yevama shehegdila ben ha'achin, muteres li naseh me'echa min ha'achin. She's still allowed to do yibum. Okay. Right? What's the chiddush? Listen to this. Now let's say this is fascinating. You see, they're all living in the same house, right? They're a close-knit family. So you might have thought maybe kind of what happened over the course of time, right? So Rachel's married to Reuven. Reuven passed away. Everyone's living in the same house. Everyone's close. Maybe I should be choshesh that what? One time, one of the brothers came home, right? He was exhausted. And maybe what did Rachel help him do? What did she help him do? She helped him take off his shoes. Okay, it's called chesed. It's also called chalitza, right? So maybe we should be concerned that we shouldn't allow her to do chalitza because maybe, again, it's a tight-knit family. Maybe she helped one of the brothers take off a shoe. To which the Gemara says, man, so we'll say the Gemara says, Taima delo chazinan. Now, the reason for this is because we've never seen her take off the shoe of one of the brothers. Ha-chazinon, but I will say, if we were to see her take off the shoe, let's say we're watching, right? We see, they're in the house, right? Ultimately, I say, by the way, you could even imagine where this could happen, right? You could imagine, I'll tell you, I'll paint the picture for you. Rachel's married to Reuven. Reuven dies. They're getting ready for the levaya, right? I will say, they're taking off their leather shoes. Right? I mean, you can wear leather shoes to a levaya, but they're taking off their leather shoes. Rachel helps one of the brothers take off his shoes. We just saw her take off the shoes of one of the brothers. So says the Gemara, the only reason we don't have to be choshesh for it is because we didn't see it. But if we were to see it, ha-chazinan cheshinan. Really? What, even then, why should we be concerned for chalitza? After all, the Hatanya we learned, bein shenis kaven hu v'lo nis kavnehi. If he had kavana for chalitza, but she didn't, bein shenis kavnehi v'lo nis kaven hu, or she had kavana and he didn't, chalitza sa psula, ad she's kavnu shneim ke'echad. Now we'll say, by the way, chalitza requires kavana. Kavana on whose part? On both the Yavam and the Yevama. Both of them require chalitza. So I will say, if chalitza, in other words, if there is the removal of a shoe, but lamaisa, no kavana, that's not chalitza. So I will say, even going back to our case, where let's say again, they're getting ready for the levaya, you see her taking off the shoe of one of the brothers. Is that chalitza? Absolutely not. So what's the problem over here? To which the Gemara says, that's what it means to say. Af agav de chazinon ein choshishin shema kivnu. Now, what we meant to say is like this. Even if you saw her taking off the shoe of one of the brothers, we're not choshesh that they had kavanah for chalitza. That's the Chiddush Rabosai, which is pretty amazing. So even if you saw her, mamish taking off the shoes of one of the brothers, we're not choshesh for chalitza. Vigidamri, others say, taima delo chazinon. The reason we're not choshesh is because we didn't see. In other words, if you don't see her taking, even though they're all living in the house together, if you don't see her taking off the shoe of one of the brothers, you need not be choshesh that shoe removal took place. Ha chazinon chosheshin. But I will say, if we were to see it, if we were to see her taking off the shoes of one of the brothers, we would be choshesh that maybe that's a chalitza. The Gemara says, but what about the fact that we just said that chalitza requires kavana? I will say, this is incredible. Hanimili lishtari la'alma. When does chalitza require kavana on the part of all parties involved? That's to allow her to marry into the general population. Aval la'achin mifsala. But to the brothers, she could become pasul or psula even without a bona fide chalitza. Rabosai, this is dramatically, rivetingly amazing. We just learned something fascinatingly new, which is, Rabosai, there's tzvei dinin by chalitza. There's two concepts, there's two levels of chalitza. There's chalitza that allows her to marry into the general population, and then there's chalitza that ultimately, again, passes her from marrying the brothers. And it's tzvei dinin, it's two different levels of chalitza. Chalitza that allows you to marry into the general population. What type of chalitza is that? What type of chalitza is that? What type of chalitza is that? That's chalitza that has kavana on the part of all parties. That's a chalitza ultimately, again, where she has kavana, where he has kavana. That's chalitza that allows you to marry into the general population. But Abosai, even what we'll call a behavioral chalitza, right? The chalitza that goes through the motions of chalitza, even without kavana, will shut down the possibility of her marrying the brothers. So we'll say, isn't that fascinating? Now again, you're still going to probably require another chalitza in that case to just seal the deal, a proper chalitza. But lamaisa, once there is something that looks like chalitza with their brothers, yibum is off the table. Yibum is off the table. So we'll say, so literally again, so watch this. So like if you have this situation where they're getting ready for the levaya, and Rachel goes over to Shimon, one of the brothers, right? Helps him take off his shoes. They will say, what's the halacha in that moment? What's the halacha? And we see it. What's the halacha? Done. The door to Yibum is shut. No Yibum. No Yibum. And ultimately, she can no longer marry any of the brothers. Can she marry into the general population pool? No. That we're still going to require another. Isn't that incredible? Absolutely incredible. Back to sandal. Sandal atavra bepishta in cholzin bo. We'll say if you have a sandal, this is actually very interesting, that is sewn with linen, you can't use it for chalitza. Now, what does it mean that the sandal is sewn with linen? Take a look at Rashi. Shetafar besocho beged pishtan ke'ein shetafar besocho levadin lishnachrina atavra bepishtan shetafar b'mishicha. Now, we'll say two possibilities. Either it's a shoe with a linen lining, or more simpler, right? Or more simply put, halacha l'maisa what? It's a shoe that has linen stitching. A shoe that has linen stitching. Okay, fine. What's the halacha? Doesn't work. Either way, you can't go ahead and use it for chalitza. Why not? Shneimar v'ana alcha tachash. So we'll say the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Yecheskel, and the pasuk from Yecheskel says v'ana leich tachash. I will literally shoe you. I don't know if that's the right verb, right? I will put you in a shoe of tachash. I will say, what's tachash? By the way, tachash, amazing of the Gemara Masech Shabbos, we saw tachash. Tachash was the miraculous animal that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created for the midbar, that whose skin was used for the curtains for the roof of the Mishkan. The idea over here is, what's a shoe? What's a shoe? A shoe is a shoe that is made from leather. If it's not made from leather, it's not a shoe. And by the way, not only that, if it's made from additional items than leather, it's also not called a shoe. So therefore, again, if you use linen stitching, it doesn't work. Doesn't work. I'll say, so I'll take it a step further. Maybe you could only use a shoe of tachash leather. Now, Bosai, that's going to be a problem because the truth is the tachash animal no longer exists. But at least we'll say tachash means an animal skin. Maybe you could only use a tachash shoe, to which the Gemara says nothing else, to which the Gemara says nal riba. No, the pasuk says nal, and nal comes to teach you all kinds of shoes. Nal riba afilu kol mili. If that's the case, then again, maybe nal comes to include all kinds of shoes, even with linen stitching or linen inserts, to which the Gemara says imkein tachash maya hanile. If that's the case, then what good is tachash? Fine. So I will say, who shall are? utrisosiov shall seyar mau. Interesting case. What happens if you have a shoe that's made of leather, but its laces are made of hair, made of animal hair? So I'll say, so the shoe is made of leather, but ultimately, again, the laces are made of hair. Mau, Amarle, Milo Karina Be Vanalach Tachash. That works, because I will say, what does Vanalech Tachash means? The shoe has to come from the Tachash, which means what? The shoe has to come from an animal. Well, guess what? The hair comes from an animal also. That's good enough. Ihachi, Kula Seyar Nami. If that's the case, what happens if you have a shoe totally made of animal hair? Maybe that should work as well. Hahu karkar mikri. That's not called the minal, that's called the karkar. Apparently they used to make a type of shoe that was made out of animal hair, but that's not called the minal, that's not called the shoe, that's called the karkar. Okay, Amir Kana Lishmuel, Mimai Dahai Bechalzanalo min al raglo mishlafu. Now this is an incredible sugya. Both say all of this is based on the phrase v'chalza. Right, so both say, so the pasuk is v'nigash shivim to Allah le'eni hazakin v'chalza na'alo me'al raglo. Now both say, how do we translate v'chalza? She will remove the shoe from his foot. She'll remove the shoe. That's v'chalza. She'll remove the shoe from his foot. So both say, get ready for this. Get ready. This is gonna blow your mind. V'chalza na'alo me'al raglo mishlafu. Now both say, so what does v'chalza mean? She'll remove. Dichsiv v'choltzu es ha'avonim asher b'hem anaga. They both say, because where else do we see this lashon? Tsaras habayis. The home is stricken with tsaras, or at least what looks like tsaras. So what's the halacha? What do you do? V'chiltzu es ha'avonim. What does v'chiltzu es ha'avonim mean? What does that mean? You'll remove the stones. So you see, a lashon of v'choltza is a lashon of removal. So the Gemara is supposed to get ready for this. Ve'ima zaruzihu. Maybe not. Maybe v'cholza doesn't mean removal. Maybe cholza's lashon zaruze. Now both say, look at Rashi, zaruzehu, shenot losa me'al gabe karka uman ilosa beraglo. Now both say, get ready for this. Maybe v'cholza nalo doesn't mean take off his shoe. Maybe v'cholza nalo means what? Put on his shoe. So the Gemara says, where would I see this from? Dichsiv, Hechaltzu me'itchem anoshim latzava. Because they will say, what does the pasuk say? Hechaltzu me'itchem. They will say, what does that mean? Hechaltzu me'itchem anoshim latzava. What does that mean? They will say, in this lashon, Hechaltzu means strengthen. Add people from your ranks to the army. I will say, before we go on, I just want to tell you an incredible Musar Haskell on this. Do you understand what just happened over here? If you were 3 more cups of coffee into your day, you would be falling off your chair with this Gemara. Why? I will say, understand what the Gemara just did. The Gemara just taught us the concept of having a paradigm shift. Right? What does it mean to have a paradigm shift? Right? You look at the world a certain way. And a paradigm shift means just because I look at the world a certain way, I sometimes have to learn to look at the world in a dramatically different way. For my entire life, I've been looking at the pasuk of V'cholza na'alo, and it's a davar pashut that v'cholza na'alo means what? Remove the shoe. The Gemara says, by the way, maybe it means put the shoe on. Now, both I just want to point out, that's not going to be the maskana. We know already. It's a little bit anticlimactic. We know how this ends. But the Muslim will say the exercise is so profound because the exercise requires you to see things from, at least for a couple of lines of Gemara, from a totally different perspective. And this is how Chazal condition us to the concept of a paradigm shift. Because in life, if you can't see things from different vantage points, and if you can't see things from different perspectives, you become locked in your ways and fundamentally unable to grow. The ability to experience a paradigm shift and be able to see things from a dramatically different vantage point is the absolute core necessity for personalistic actualization and growth. And I both say, that's what's unfolding over here. Ksuvis Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis 102b, a fundamental paradigm shift. So the Gemara says, maybe again, veichatz, right? The chalatz means to put on. After all, we'll just finish this off. The Gemara says, Heichatzu meitchem anashim latzava, and Heichatzu means add people to the army, bring people to the army. To which the Gemara says, no. Hasam nami shalufi mi beisa lekarva. It means remove people from their homes and bring them to the battle. Shabbos say even there, right? Hechaltzu meitchem anoshim doesn't mean bring people to the army. It means remove people from their homes and bring them to the standing army. So we'll have to stop over here. We're going to continue Miras Hashem with this dramatic discussion Miras Hashem tomorrow. Shkoyach.